Well, good morning. Good morning. Our Sunday lesson today is all or one, an inconvenient truth. It just is. Our lives are full of inconvenient truths. If we want to save money, we got to stop spending money without thinking about what we're spending. If we want to lose weight, we may have to stop getting fast food and donuts and pizza and brownies. If we want to get our bodies stronger and more flexible, we may have to get up an hour and a half earlier than what we're used to go to our gym and work out. Right? So life is full of inconvenient truths. But you know what? In spiritual circles, we got an abundance of them also. And so like here in Unity, we talk about God is all things, and that means me and everybody else. Right? That's our all is one, or all are one. Everything that we can see, everything that's ever been and everything yet to be, it comes from the one source. And in the Bible, this is expressed as, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was that Word. And this is where the story of let there be light comes from. First, something is in the mind of God as an inspiration or an intention, and then it becomes a manifest physically. So there's where we got the idea, or there's where we get the light, there's where we get the planets and the galaxies and all the animals that are wandering around on this planet. This is how we are all one, because we come from just one source. There's not like a bunch of different sources, and like the real special ones of us came from this one source, and the ones who aren't so special think differently than we do. They came from this other source. Now, the first time I heard this spiritual truth, all or one, was at a meditation maybe 20 years ago. And it was in Redlands. And the lady that was doing the meditation, to me, she was like really spiritual and always right on. And so when she said it, I was like, it must be true because she's so spiritual. I was also attending Unity. And when I heard it, it gave me the warm fuzzies, right? I'm meditating. All are one. I'm thinking about the people I love, the people who are easy to love, puppies, dolphins, right? Daisies. And then I left, right? The meditation was over, and then I had to go on with my day. And practically, the practice of it was not as easy as it was while I was meditating. This kind of practice, if we decide we're going to be the kind of person who lives by these principles, we decide we are going to be that highly creative soul, that we're going to call forth the God force through us into our lives, that means utilizing the tools to stay in alignment with our divine self. Now, here at Unity, of course, I love our 5 principles. They help us. You could use the 4 agreements. These things, there's so many tools out there available. But the practice of recognizing all are one, everything comes from one source. This is a practice. We must live this truth then, even when we don't feel like it. Even when we go out into the world after our meditation or after our massage or after doing the whatever that we love doing. We go out into this world where there's these opposing beliefs. There's duality. There's extremism. There's fundamentalism. We go out into this world and we get offended, and we take things personally. This is where it's important to practice this truth, all are one. This is where we really need to do this practice. Our charge is to live this truth if we want to live like as Christ suggested and do greater things. In fact, he told us, he gave us another really inconvenient truth. You must love each other as I have loved you. Right? That's another inconvenient truth. But this truth is really, it's just about recognizing that every person, even if they eat, pray, love, vote differently than we do, they are still the activity of God in this world. Just because we are loving another person as Christ loved, doesn't mean we have to be cozy with them. Doesn't mean we have to be friends with them. Doesn't mean we have to invite them to our house, let them sit at our table. We don't have to do any of that. We're just seeing how they are also the activity of God in this world. And we don't know how God's going to work through them, and we got to be okay with that. We're here for ourselves to express God through us. This is about recognizing the divine spark and honoring that divine spark in other people. When we can do that for the person that we care for the least, when we can do that, can you honor the divine spark in the person you didn't vote for at the last election? Okay, can you honor the divine spark in that person? That is when we can get that practice down, right? That's where we move ourselves into a space where we really are available and aware, and we know we're here to help end the suffering of other people on this planet. You know, one of the reasons I love the story of Kuan Yin so much is that she suffered a lot in her life, but she was a wonderful, kind, compassionate, loving person. Her dad was very abusive to her. He was a terrible dad, and she ended up dying because of her dad. But she had been such a good person in her life that when she crossed over, the gods said, "Come into nirvana. You've been such a beautiful, wonderful soul on this planet. You can just go straight to nirvana." And she looked back at humanity, and she saw all of the suffering. And she said, "I'm not going anywhere until we all go together." That's enlightenment. Like, that is the highest example of enlightenment. Like, get ourselves somewhere where we feel good. It's like, yeah, bye, see ya. I'm on to nirvana, okay? But no, she wouldn't do that. When we separate ourselves out from people who think differently, when we separate ourselves out from people where we have these perceived differences, we cannot thrive. We cannot thrive if we're focused on the perceived differences. I had this hairdresser. I don't know if I can talk about this, but it's a good story. I met her back in 2010, but I started seeing her regularly in 2015. And she was very different from me. I was like so judgy after that first appointment with her, because her parenting was all different than mine, even though she wasn't a mom. And politics is like yeah, I know. She had these really stiff, strict ideas on parenting. It was like really threw me. I'm like, you're not even a mom, right? But she really did a good job with my hair. Okay, so this was back in 2015, and I see her every month, because I would go every single month, every 4 weeks. And I just decided I'm not going to talk to her about things I don't want to hear about from her. What I discovered is that actually we had very similar values when it came to how children should be treated and how children should be raised. But when she heard about my parenting style, attachment parenting, and her sister also did attachment parenting, but her sister's kids ran wild. But then she met my kids, and she was doing their hair, and she was like, my nieces and nephews are not like that at all. Your kids are so respectful and thoughtful, and they're just, and I'm like, yeah. But I discovered, because I let myself get to know her more, I decided I'm not going to focus on what we don't agree with, but we ended up getting to know each other on a deeper level. I didn't really understand how much knowing her affected me until I found out she passed away a couple weeks ago. And I got to evaluate our relationship over these years. It would have almost been 7 years. And she gave me the opportunity to look past what I perceived a crusty exterior. She gave me the opportunity to stop being so judgmental. Because that's what I had decided. Oh, she's all wrong on this and this and this part of life, but I won't say anything to her face. I'll just judge her quietly after I leave. That was really my thought. But in getting to spend that time with her since 2015, like March or April, 2 hours a month, I got to know her as one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. One of the most generous people that I ever met. When we were doing our fundraiser for this event area out here, she was like one of the first people to give me money for it. I was just talking about how excited I was, and she just gives me a lot of cash, and she's like, "This is for your fundraiser. You've got to build that event area." She's never even been here. Okay, so I got to really evaluate this as I was dealing with how sad I was feeling over this. She gave me a tremendous opportunity. We miss out on these opportunities when we separate ourselves out from our perceptions of what we're thinking about something. You know, it's like, I don't know what it is. It's like swiping left or swiping right, like those dating apps. Like my husband and I, we met in the Stone Ages. I gave him my number. I had to carve it on a rock, you know. But I know somebody was like explaining this dating app where you look at a picture and then like 3 facts about this person, and you decide on that picture and those 3 facts whether they're worthy to know or not. And I almost did that with Carol, my hairdresser. I almost did that with her. And it would have been my loss. This is about this inconvenient truth. All are one. Loving each other as Christ loved. Honoring the divine spark in all people. Because we don't know God's plan in everybody else on this planet. Sometimes we don't even really know God's plan through us. What makes us think we can tell everybody else what God's plan is in them? Right? Now, right now, we are in a tide of unrest. Right? Planetary, this tide, this wrecking ball energy that's been going around the planet for the last 2 years, right? So we are in this tide of unrest. Now, there's really nothing wrong with having a period of unrest, because when we are in faith, like we are solution-oriented, we're calling forth that God force through us. And so a period of unrest can lead to massive change and growth. But if we are not in faith, and we don't have a firm foundation, okay, we're not practicing our faith, we're not demonstrating our faith through our choices and our actions, we can get overwhelmed by everything that's happening, and then we can get swept along with the group thinking. Now, there is a danger of group thinking, because most of the time the group thinking is all focused on what's offending me, what I'm taking personally, what I don't like. I want to point my finger and blame. That's where group thinking tends to go. Now, of course, if we can get involved with a group, it's like, let's get inspired. Let's have some new ideas. Now, that kind of group thinking would feel really good and lift us. But it's not the tendency, right? We can get into group thinking and align with other people who are equally offended. We can actually feel like we're making connections with those people. My son's birthday was a couple weeks ago, and I went to a local Mexican food restaurant. You have to go inside and place your order. And they had a sign on the door. This was like 2 weeks ago, right? They had a sign on the door. It's like, we're asking everyone to wear a mask. Well, I put my mask on. I walked inside. I placed my order. And then I walked back outside while I waited. I could see through the window, And I was outside with like 3 other people, and we all had our mask hanging on our ear, right? We were just kind of standing there. Well, this one gal, she's the ringleader, I can tell. She's like, I'm just so tired of masks, and one place it's okay to not have it, and another place you have to wear it, and blah, blah, blah. There's all this complication, blah, blah, blah. And everybody is kind of like, yeah, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, I just want this pandemic to be over. I just want to be free in my breathing and see people smile. And everybody else is kind of doing that too. And then she says, and we're all in this wave together, okay? So then she says, and I just found out that the city now wants us to separate our trash. That we have to have trash for composting. So you can't throw your food in regular trash, you gotta throw your old food in the composting trash. And I did this. I think that's a good idea. Because I do. I'm interested in composting. But then the other 2 people in her little ringleader thing, they were just like, oh, that's so much more work, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? I wasn't in that little circle anymore. Right? They glared at me, and I had to just move over 4 feet. Because now I wasn't offended by the same thing they were offended by, so I'm no longer part of the group. Okay, this is what happens. Right? So we want to watch this. We are here to express the divine through us. We're here to call forth our divine nature and send it out into our lives. To live this truth, all are one, this inconvenient truth. To live the very inconvenient truth that we must love others like Christ loved them too. We must love others even if they have all these different beliefs and stuff than we do. It's not enough for us to have compassion and love for the people we already love, for the people who we already value their opinions. That's not enough. That's the easy thing to do. And we're not growing when we're doing something easy. Like something I've learned through working out at the gym is that after I've done something for a little while, it stops hurting. And then I have to do something a little harder. A little bit harder. Right? And so it's easy to love these people in my life who are easy to love. So we're learning by loving the God and those people we can't stand, that irritate us, the people we didn't vote for. Christ, he said this thing about turning the other cheek. The whole verse is from Matthew 5:39. This verse has a lot of controversy around it because of how people read it. But it says, in teacher Yeshua's words, you should not resist evil, and in fact turn the other cheek. And how I used to see this verse too, of course, was I can't resist evil, so I just give into it. I just become evil too, right? And turn the other cheek. So I'm just supposed to let somebody smack me around? I found out because I use the Lamsa edition Bible. It's translated straight from Aramaic, the language of Jesus, and turn the other cheek was actually an Aramaic idiom meaning do not start a quarrel or a fight, let it go. That's what it meant. It's like we would say, just let it go. Starting an argument with that person's not going to do you any good. Yeah, just let it go. Well, back then, they're like, just turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. Now, this idea of resisting evil, what that actually means is when we go into resistance, we put a lot of focus on something. So when we're resisting the things in our life we don't like, we're blaming all that stuff. We're blaming it. Well, if we're blaming something, we're not in faith. We're not seeing it as part of the all, right? Even difficult situations and events and circumstances and conditions, God is at work in all of those things too. So if we're looking at something and blaming, we're not going to be able to call forth the God force, right? So to don't resist evil, that's what he's saying is stop focusing on it. Instead, focus on the Father within. That's what the rest of his message was about. Focus on the Father within. Turn to the Father within. Let the Father within do all these works. I don't do any of these works. I don't lean on my own understanding. I turn to the Father within. That was his message over and over and over again to all of us, if you lived back then. But it's still a message now. It's still a message now. Turning the other cheek. This means giving up all hope that someone will agree with you, believe like you, and see the world like you. That's what turning the other cheek is. Turning the other cheek is to give up all hope that they will become how you want them to become. That's what turning the other cheek is. We are here to call forth the divine, those qualities, the God qualities. Kindness, compassion, creative expression, tenderness, love, understanding. All of those God qualities, and there are so many more. When we call forth the God qualities, what happens is that divine expands through us. Because the divine is expansive in itself. It's always in expansive motion. It's always growing. So if we're resisting evil, what we're really doing is we're looking at something we don't like, and we want to fight about it. We want to set somebody straight about it. We want to point our fingers at somebody who we're blaming. And what happens is then we are restricting how God can work through us. Restriction is not an expansive energy. When we are pointing our finger and we're blaming and we want to argue with somebody and we want to set somebody straight, it's not God force we're calling through us. It's not the expansive force. It's a restrictive force. And we are not designed to be in restriction. Our bodies will not like it and our minds will not like it. And over a period of time, we will do a lot of suffering with all that. Do a lot of suffering with that. Wallace Wattles, the author of The Science of Being Rich, or Getting Rich, one of those, he actually wrote other books, and he wrote this one book called The Science of Being Well. And he talks about the expansive force of God. He says there is a principle of life in the universe, and life is with a capital L, right? There's a principle of life in the universe, and it is the one living substance from which all things are made. Just the one substance. It's God, right? That's God. He says, well, all the visible things are made from this one substance, right? God is all things, and that means everything that's ever been and everything that's yet to be. All the visible things are made from this one substance. The one substance, it keeps expanding in its formless and invisible state through all the things it's already created. And that's us. That's each and every one of us. It keeps creating through us because it's expanding through us. Restriction doesn't let it work through us. We divert it. Like it's always ready. It's always there. It's always seeking to express through us. But we stop it. We have to be able to give that formless substance the space to do what it does. If you think about a seed, right? Within the acorn, I love talking about acorns, right? Because there's a divine program already within the acorn, so it grows into the mighty oak tree. You don't have to teach it anything. It doesn't have to go off for a workshop or anything like that. It doesn't have to read special books. It already has everything within it that it needs. But it also has to be in the nurturing environment to allow life, with a capital L, to flow through it and trigger that growth. You can take an acorn and you can string it up on a necklace. You can wear it the rest of your days. It's not going to grow into an oak tree. It's not even going to try, probably, right? You're not going to be walking around in 5 years with this like branch hanging off of you, right? That's my oak tree. It's growing. No, the acorn needs to be in the environment where we can grow now, or where it can grow. Now, if we are unable to recognize this truth, this inconvenient truth, all are one, we are not going to be able to allow life to move through us either. We just won't be providing the fertile, rich soil, which is our bodies and our minds. We can't provide that fertile ground for the thoughts of God to work through us. If we aren't able to love as Christ loved, we are restricting our own lives. We're choking it off. We're choking off God, the God force, that power that creates worlds, and it can expand through us. That power that creates worlds is available to each of us right here and now. But we can choke it off with our hating and our blaming and our judging. So we need to provide the ground for it. When we're nurturing our own lives with love, when we're handling our lives with care, when we're nurturing and handling with care the people that we know, that's how we're opening the way for this God force to work through us and into everybody's life. So I always like the metaphor of a garden, because you can literally think of a garden, or you can think of the metaphor of a garden of your life. Let's say that you plant a garden, and then you don't care for it for a few weeks. It's been raining, right? And you go out there after a month, and your garden is choked with weeds. Like the weeds have just gone nuts. And you look at all these weeds, and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many weeds there. How did this happen? And then you also notice, like everything you planted, what's not being choked off by the weeds is getting eaten by the rabbits. Right? And so you get mad. And you're like, oh, I hate these weeds. I'm offended by these weeds, and I'm mad that the rabbits are eating all my food. Now, if you're in a space of restriction, to restrict your garden, what you could do is pour gasoline over the whole thing and then just burn it to the ground. Like, I'm going to show those weeds, and out of spite, destroy your garden. This is restriction. This is keeping the God force from flowing through us or through your garden. Now, if you look at that garden, you see all those weeds, so many weeds. Like, it's going to be a lot of work. And you see the rabbits have eaten so much. Well, generally, when you plant a garden, you plan on planting like 30% more than what you need. You go above and beyond, because nature deserves some of that as a return. Right? So you plant a garden, you plant 30% more than what you need. Okay, all those weeds, wow, that's going to be overwhelming. There are just so many weeds. You don't have to do them all at one time. You just recommit to your garden, and you go out there and pull this many weeds. Pull a square foot. Or pull the weeds out from where your carrots are so you can see your carrots again. You don't have to do the whole garden in one Saturday afternoon, right? Lose your weekend. You can get out there right away, though, with tenderness, with love, and start pulling the things out, pulling these weeds out that don't belong there. Right? And that's your judgment call, too, to decide, I don't want these weeds here. You get to decide that. Just like in our own life, we get to decide what we need to pull. You know, in some gardens, people welcome dandelions, but not everybody does. Even though dandelions, they're like really good for your liver, right? Yeah, I saw that at Clark's. I've heard that from Don, because he knows a lot about weeds. And other plants, too. So when we look at the garden of our life, if we're doing something out of spite, like we're all offended, we're just going to get mad, we're going to blame, we're just going to do this thing, we're restricting the God force working through us. But if we approach our own life like we are loving our garden, just doing what we can a little bit at a time, and also going above and beyond what's necessary, right? In our garden, we plant extra for nature. In our own life, we should also be going above and beyond, because just doing what's required, just doing the bare minimum, we're not growing then. We're not calling forth, see the God force coming through us, that power that creates worlds. It can do so much more. And if we decide, I'm just going to do the bare minimum to get by, we're not honoring that force very well through us. So we want to even go above and beyond. We can look at how are we showing up in service? How can we serve the greater good? Because when we start serving the greater good and going above and beyond, we unleash those wild and divine forces at work in us. We unleash that power that creates worlds to work through us and now work out in our life, work in our garden. Those forces, they want to expand. They want to sweep through and open the way. They want to call forth more abundance for us, more love, deeper connections, more ideas, more inspirations, more creative expression. It's all there. So when we're looking around and we're thinking, God, there's just so much to be done. There's so many weeds. And our weeds, like in the garden of our life, that may look like relationships. There might be relationships in our life that maybe we do need to say goodbye. Or maybe there's relationships that need more repair or love or tenderness. Maybe some of the weeds in our life are how we're spending our money. And looking at how that is, how are we budgeting ourselves? Or are we like buying foo-foo stuff first and then being like, oh, I forgot to pay this bill, right? How about our health and well-being? What are the weeds we need to pull for our health and well-being? The pizza? I don't know. Maybe it needs to go. Maybe it needs to go. But when we look at something that is like so overwhelming, and we might think, where do I even start? Like I remember like when I first started on my journey of well-being and like managing my weight, at first I was just like, there's so much. Like if I could instantly start by just dropping 30 pounds, it would be so much easier to go, right? But I didn't. I had to just start. It's like a half a pound at a time. But see, the half a pound at a time adds up. Pulling 5 weeds at a time adds up. We do these little things and they add up. Right? We can clean one tiny little square of our really messy office. It looks like a paper tornado exploded. But just start with just this one area, right? And clean up. The little things add up. Small things create big things. Helen Keller said, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. So here is our call to action. And Kevin just stepped out, so I don't have can you put okay. So here's our affirmation. I'll just say it and then we can say it together. I am fertile ground for the highest thoughts of God. I am fertile ground for the highest thoughts of God. We're not fertile ground for restrictive ideas. We're not fertile ground for being offended or being mad. That's restriction. And that's decay. that's a small pond that starts growing all the bacteria and the goo on it. No, we are fertile ground only for the highest thoughts of God. Let's say it one more time. I am fertile ground for the highest thoughts of God. I am. Throw that I am in there. All right, so this inconvenient truth, all are one. Even the people that drive me nuts, this inconvenient truth, we must love each other as Christ loved. Seeing the activity of God within every person, even when we can look at them and their life and think, man, you're just doing all this stuff wrong. You're making the world a horrible place, right? We're still, what we're focusing on only is the activity of God in there. And so we are enriching our own lives when we see all as one and when we can love as Christ loved. We are enriching our own lives. And we are being given some really wonderful opportunities to see God in a way that maybe was unexpected. When my son was born, he was just barely a couple weeks old, and my husband and I and the baby, our little infant, we had to run out and pick up something. I needed something to help me as a breastfeeding mom. And so we go to May Company or something, and I see this tattoo guy, tons of tattoos everywhere, right? And he's really built big. He was big like The Rock, right? Like Dwayne Johnson big, right? You don't remember. Don't nod your head at me. But yeah, maybe you do remember because you were 2 or 3 weeks old. I saw this guy walking around and I was like, ooh, scary. Ooh, scary. That's a scary man. I can't take my baby. Like I was doing that, right? I was all worried. Well then, so I hand out him to Dave, and Dave sits down. And, because he has to wait on me now, so he's sitting there with the baby and my purse and all this stuff. Well, I'm in the dressing room trying on stuff for nursing moms. And I pick out my things. I come out, and guess who's sitting next to my husband, pointing at my baby. I was like, you're so cute. Oh my God, hello there, little man. Big, scary tattoo guy wasn't scary at all. He was a sweetie who loved babies, right? How do we know this stuff about somebody when we just look at them and just swipe no? How do we know this about people? We're separating ourselves out from people. Living these truths, all are one, and loving each other as Christ loved. This tide of unrest, when we are living these truths, we stem that tide of unrest. We stem that tide. And we start making deeper connections in all areas of our life. The entire package of our life, we're making deeper connections with how we should be treating our own body and how we should be in relationships and how we can be creating. And we're calling forth those wild and divine forces through us. We see past our limiting perceptions of things. We see past all that. We show up in bigger ways in our life. How we show up through service, how we show up in our relationships. We do more than just the bare minimum. We're demonstrating faith through our actions. We demonstrate faith through our choices and then our actions. Because we're living in faith. And this is actually the definition of generosity. Because the God force working through all of its creations creates more through its single creation than the single creation is itself, like a tree. Go to Wildwood Canyon Park and count all the acorns on one of those oak trees, right? That is abundance. That is life with a capital L, working abundance through one of its creations. Okay, the trees do not have the kind of consciousness that we do. I don't know what their consciousness is. It's amazing, I suppose, but we have a different consciousness. We get to choose. We get to act. But that force can still utilize us to produce 1,000,000 of whatever it is, or more, infinite. Its creation through us, whatever it is we're creating, is actually infinite, what it is creating through us. And all we have to do is really see we are all one and love each other as Christ loved. Really, we're just loving the activity of God in another person. It doesn't matter what that person's doing. We love the activity of God in that person, because how God works through that person could really surprise us. How God works through that person you didn't vote for could really surprise you. So we want to let ourselves be surprised instead of looking at that crusty, what we think is a crusty exterior. Everything really, right now, in spite of the tide of unrest, in spite of some of the wrecking ball energies we're going through, right now, really, everything is okay. Everything really is okay, because right in this minute, even if we didn't feel faith 5 minutes ago, it's there. Because the God force is working through us all the time. We can step into that faith. We can gather ourselves around that faith right now and be solution-oriented and call forth more good into this world. Because with faith, we know anything is possible. And that is how we are creating heaven on earth. So until next time, remember, you were designed to do all of this. You were designed to multiply the abundance coming through you, the goodness, the kindness, the tenderness. In everything you do, you are blessed, and so it is.